All right, welcome back. So, today we will be reading chapter 20, which is Admonishments. And admonishments is kind of a weird word. So, if you don't know what it means, it's when a teacher scolds a pupil or a student in kind of a positive way, like a teasing kind of way. So, Brahm might admonish Eragon over his swordsmanship. But let's get started. Chapter 20, Admonishments. Once a modicum of strength returned to him, Eragon staggered out of the alley, skirting the dead monsters. He did not get far before Caddoc trotted to his side. "Good, you weren't hurt," mumbled Eragon. He noticed, without particularly caring, that his hands were shaking violently and his movements were jerky. He felt detached, as if everything he saw were happening to someone else. Eragon found Snowfire, nostrils flared and ears flat against his head, prancing by the corner of the house, ready to bolt. Brahm was still slumped, motionless in his saddle. Eragon reached out with his mind and soothed the horse. Once Snowfire relaxed, Eragon went to Brahm. There was a long, blood-soaked cut on the old man's right arm. The wound bled profusely, but it was neither deep nor wide. Still, Eragon knew it had to be bound before Brahm lost too much blood. He stroked Snowfire for a moment, then slid Brahm out of the saddle. The weight proved too much for him, and Brahm dropped heavily to the ground. Eragon was shocked by his own weakness. A scream of rage filled his head. Saphira dived out of the sky and landed fiercely in front of him. Keeping her wings half raised, she hissed angrily, eyes burning. Her tail lashed, and Eragon winced as it snapped overhead. "Are you hurt?" she asked, rage boiling in her voice. "No," he assured her, as he laid Brahm on his back. She growled and exclaimed, "Where are the ones who did this? I will tear them apart." He wearily pointed in the direction of the alley. "It'll do no good. They're already dead." "You killed them?" Saphira sounded surprised. He nodded. "Somehow." With a few terse words, he told her what had happened, while he searched his saddlebags for the rags which Zarak had been wrapped. Saphira said gravely, "You have grown." Eragon grunted. He found a long rag and carefully rolled back Brahm's sleeve. With a few deft strokes, he cleaned the cut and bandaged it tightly. "I wish we were still in Palancar Valley," he said to Saphira. "There, at least, I knew what plants were good for healing. Here, I don't have any idea what will help him." He retrieved Brahm's sword from the ground, wiped it, then returned it to the sheath on Brahm's belt. "We should leave," said Saphira. "There may be more Urgals lurking about." "Can you carry Brahm? Your saddle will hold him in place, and you can protect him." "Yes, but I'm not leaving you alone." "Fine, fly next to me, but let's get out of here." He tied the saddle onto Saphira, then put his arms around Brahm and tried to lift him up, but again his diminished strength failed him. "Saphira, help." She snaked her head past him and caught the back of Brahm's robe beneath her teeth. Arching her neck, she lifted the old man off the ground like a cat would a kitten and deposited him onto her back. Then Eragon slipped Brahm's legs through the saddle straps and tightened them. He looked up when the old man moaned and shifted. Brahm blinked barely, putting a hand to his head. He gazed down at Eragon with concern. "Did Saphira get here in time?" Eragon shook his head. "I'll explain later. Your arm is injured. I bandaged it the best I could, but you need a safe place to rest." "Yes," said Brahm, gingerly touching his arm. "Do you know where my sword... I see you found it." Eragon finished tightening the straps. "Saphira's going to take you and follow me by air." "Are you sure you want me to ride her?" asked Brahm. "I can ride Snowfire." "Not with that arm." "This way, even if you faint, you won't fall off." Brahm nodded. "I'm honored." He wrapped his good arm around Saphira's neck, and she took off in a flurry, springing high into the sky. Eragon backed away, buffeted by the eddies from her wings, and returned to the horses. He tied Snowfire behind Caddoc, then left Yazuak, returning to the trail and following it southward. It led through a rocky area, veered left, and continued along the bank of the Ninor River. Ferns, mosses, and small bushes dotted the sides of the path. It was refreshingly cool under the trees, but Eragon did not let the soothing air lull him into a sense of security. He stopped briefly to fill the water skins and let the horses drink. Glancing down, he saw the Razak's spoor. At least we're going in the right direction. Saphira circled overhead, keeping a clean eye on him. It disturbed him that they had seen only 2 Urgles. The villagers had been killed, and Yazuak ransacked by a large horde. Yet where was it? Perhaps the ones we encountered were rear guard or a trap left for anyone who was following the main force. His thoughts turned to how he had killed the Urgles. An idea, a revelation slowly wormed its way through his mind. He, Eragon, farm boy of Palankar Valley, had used magic. Magic! It was the only word for what had happened. It seemed impossible, but he could not deny what he had seen. Somehow I'd become a sorcerer or wizard. But he did not know how to use his power again or what its limits and dangers might be. How can I have this ability? Was it common among the riders? And if Brahm knew of it, why didn't he tell me? He shook his head in wonder and bewilderment. He conversed with Saphira to check on Brahm's condition and to share his thoughts. She was just as puzzled as he was about the magic. Saphira, can you find us a place to stay? I can't see very far down here. While she searched, he continued along the Ninor. The summons just reached him, just as the light was fading. Come. Saphira sent him an image of a secluded clearing by the trees, by the river. Eragon turned the horses in the new direction and nudged them into a trot. With Saphira's help, it was easy to find, but it was so well hidden that he doubted anybody else would notice it. A small, smokeless fire was already burning when he entered the clearing. Brahm sat next to it, tending to his arm, which he held at an awkward angle. Saphira was crouched behind him, her body tense. She looked intently at Eragon and asked, Are you sure you aren't hurt? Not on the outside, but I'm not sure about the rest of me. I should have been there sooner. Don't feel bad. We all make mistakes today. Mine was not staying closer to you. Her gratitude for that remark washed over him. He looked at Brahm. How are you? The old man glanced at his arm. It's a large scratch and hurts terribly, but it should heal quickly enough. I need a fresh bandage. This one didn't last as long as I'd hoped. They boiled water to wash Brahm's wound. Then Brahm tied a fresh rag to his arm and said, I must eat, and you look hungry as well. Let's have dinner first, then talk. When their bellies were full and warm, Brahm lit his pipe. Now, I think it's time for you to tell me what transpired while I was unconscious. I am most curious. His face reflected the flickering firelight, and his bushy eyebrows stuck out fiercely. Eragon nervously clasped his hands and told the story without embellishment. Brahm remained silent throughout it, his face inscrutable. When Eragon finished, Brahm looked down at the ground. For a long time, the only sound was the snapping fire. Brahm finally stirred. Have you used this power before? No. Do you know anything about it? A little. Brahm's face was thoughtful. It seems I owe you a debt for saving my life. I hope I can return the favor someday. You should be proud. If you escape unscathed from slaying their first Urgle. But in the manner which you did was very dangerous. You could have destroyed yourself and the whole town. It wasn't as if I had a choice, said Eragon defensively. The Urgles were almost upon me. If I had waited, they would have chopped me into pieces. Brahm stamped his teeth vigorously on the pipe stem. You didn't have any idea what you were doing. Then tell me, challenged Eragon. I've been searching for answers to this mystery, but I can't make any sense of it. What happened? How could I possibly use magic? No one has ever instructed me or taught me spells. Brahm's eyes flashed. This isn't something you should be taught, much less use. Well, I have used it, and I may need it to fight again, but I won't be able to if you don't help me. What's wrong? Is there some secret I'm not supposed to learn until I'm old and wise? Or maybe you don't know anything about magic. Boy! Roared Brahm. You demand answers with insolence rarely seen. If you knew what you asked for, you would not be so quick to inquire. Do not try me." He paused, then relaxed into a kinder countenance. "The knowledge you ask for is more complex than you understand." Eragon rose hotly in protest. "I feel as if I've been thrust into a world with strange rules and no one will explain." "I understand," said Brom. He fiddled with a piece of grass. "It's late, and we should sleep. But I will tell you a few things now to stop your badgering. This magic, for it is magic, has rules like the rest of the world. If you break the rules, the penalty is death, without exception. Your deeds are limited by your strength, the words you know, and your imagination." "What do you mean by words?" asked Eragon. "More questions!" cried Brom. "For a moment I had hoped you were empty of them, but you are quite right in asking. When you shot the Urgles, didn't you say something?" "Yes, Bersinger." The fire flared, and a shiver ran through Eragon. Something about the word made him feel incredibly alive. "I thought so. Bersinger is from an ancient language that all living things used to speak. However, it was forgotten over time and went unspoken for eons in Ecclesia, until the elves brought it back over the sea. They taught it to the other races, who used it for making and doing powerful things. The language has a name for everything, if you can find it." "But what does that have to do with magic?" interrupted Eragon. "Everything! It is the basis for all power. The language describes the true nature of things, not the superficial aspects that everyone sees. For example, fire is called Bersinger. Not only is that a name for fire, it is the name for fire. If you are strong enough, you can use Bersinger to direct fire to do what you will. And that is what happened today." Eragon thought about it for a moment. "Why was the fire blue? How come it didn't exactly what I wanted, if all I said was fire?" "The color varies from person to person. It depends on who says a word. As to why the fire did what you wanted, that's a matter of practice. Most beginners have to spell out exactly what they want to happen. As they gain more experience, it isn't as necessary. A true master could just say water and create something totally unrelated, like a gemstone. You wouldn't be able to understand how he had done it, but the master would have seen the connection between water and the gem, and would have used that as the focal point for his power. The practice is more of an art than anything else. What you did was extremely difficult." Saphira interrupted Eragon's thoughts. "Brom is a magician. That's how he was able to light the fire on the plains. He doesn't just know about magic. He can use it himself." Eragon's eyes widened. "You're right. Ask him about his power, but be careful what you say. It is unwise to trifle with those who have such abilities. If he is a wizard or sorcerer, who knows what his motives might have been for settling in Carvel Hall." Eragon kept that in mind, and he said carefully, "Saphira and I just realized something. You can use this magic, can't you? That's how you started the fire on the first day in the plains?" Brom inclined his head slightly. "I am proficient to some degree." "Then why didn't you fight the Urgles with it? In fact, I could think of many times where it would have been useful. You could have shielded us from the storm and kept the dirt out of our eyes." After refilling his pipe, Brom said, "Some simple reasons, really. I am not a rider, which means that, even at your weakest moment, you are stronger than I. And I have outlived my youth. I'm not as strong as I used to be. Every time I reach for magic, it gets a little harder." Eragon dropped his eyes, abashed. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," said Brom as he shifted his arm. "It happens to everyone." "Where did you learn to use magic?" "That is the one fact I'll keep to myself. Suffice it to say, it was a remote area, and from a very good teacher. I can, at the very least, pass on his lessons." Brom snuffed his pipe with a small rock. "I know you have more questions, and I will answer them, but they must wait until morning." He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Until then, I will say this to discourage any experiments. Magic takes just as much energy as if you used your arms and back. That is why you felt tired after destroying the Urgles, and that is why I was angry."
It was a dreadful risk on your part. If the magic you had used had been more energy than was in your body, it would have killed you. You should only use magic for tasks that can't be accomplished the mundane way.
How do you know if a spell will use all your energy? Asked Eragon, frightened. Brom raised his hands.
Most of the time you don't. That's why magicians have to know their limits as well. And even when they are cautious, once you commit to a task and release the magic, you can't pull it back, even if it's going to kill you. I mean this as a warning. Don't try anything until you've learned more. Now, enough of this for tonight.
As they spread out their blankets, Saphira commented with satisfaction. We are becoming more powerful, Eragon. Both of us. Soon, no one will be able to stand in our way. Yes, but which way shall we choose? Whichever one we want, she said smugly, settling down for the night. And that ends Chapter 20, Admonishments. The next chapter is Magic is the Simplest Thing. All right. Chapter 21. Nice to see you, Saname. Magic is the simplest thing. Why do you think those two Urgles were still in Yakuzak? Asked Eragon, after they had been on the trail for a while. There doesn't seem to be any reason for them to have stayed behind.
I suspect they deserted the main group and looted the town. What makes it odd is that as far as I know, Urgles have gathered in force only 2 or 3 times in history. It's unsettling what they are doing now.
Do you think the Razak caused the attack?
I don't know. The best thing we can do is continue far away from Yakuzak, and at the fastest pace we can muster. Besides, this is the direction the Razak went. South.
Eragon agreed. We still need provisions, however. Is there another town nearby?
Brom shook his head. No, but Saphira can hunt for us if we must survive on meat alone. This swath of trees may look small to you, but there are plenty of animals in it. The river is our only source of water for miles around, so many of the plain animals come here to drink. We won't starve.
Eragon remained quiet, satisfied with Brom's answer. As they rode, loud birds darted around them, and the river rushed by peacefully. It was a noisy place, full of life and energy. Eragon asked, How did that Urgle get you? Things were happening so fast I didn't see.
Bad luck, really, grumbled Brom. I was more than a match for him, so he kicked Snowfire. The idiot of a horse reared and threw me off balance. That was all the Urgle needed to give me this gash. He scratched his chin. I suppose you're still wondering about this magic. The fact that you've discovered it prevents a thorny problem. Few know it, but every rider could use magic, though differing strengths. They kept the ability secret, at the height of their power, because it gave them an advantage over their enemies. Had everyone known about it, dealing with common people would have been difficult. Many think the king's magical powers come from the fact that he is a wizard or sorcerer. That's not true. It's because he's a rider.
What's the difference? Doesn't the fact that I use magic make me a sorcerer?
Not at all. A sorcerer, like a shade, uses spirits to accomplish his will. That is totally different from your power. Nor does that make you a magician. Those powers come without the aid of spirits or dragons, and you're certainly not a witch or wizard, who get their power from various potions and spells, which brings me back to my original point, the problem you've presented. Young riders, like yourself, were put through a strict regimen designed to strengthen their bodies and increase their mental control. This regimen continued for many months, occasionally years, until the riders were deemed responsible enough to handle magic. Up until then, not one student was told of his potential powers. If one of them discovered magic by accident, he or she was immediately taken away for private tutoring. It was rare for anyone to discover magic on his own. He inclined his head towards Eragon. Though they were never put under the same pressure you were.
Then how were they finally trained to use magic? Asked Eragon. I don't know how you could teach it to anyone. If you had tried to explain it to me 2 days ago, it wouldn't have made any sense.
The students were presented with a series of pointless exercises designed to frustrate them. For example, they were instructed to move piles of stones using only their feet, fill ever-draining tubs full of water, and other impossibilities. After a time, they would get infuriated enough to use magic. Most of the time, it succeeded. What this means, Brahm continued, is that you will be disadvantaged if you ever meet an enemy who has received this training. There are still some alive who are that old. The king, for one, not to mention the elves. Any one of them could tear you apart with ease.
What can I do then?
There isn't time for formal instruction, but we can do much while we travel, said Brahm. I know many techniques you can practice that will give you strength and control, but you cannot gain the discipline the riders had overnight. You, he looked at Eragon humorously, will have to amass it on the run. It will be hard in the beginning, but the rewards will be great. It may please you to know that no rider your age has ever used magic the way you did yesterday with those 2 Urgles.
Eragon smiled at the praise. Thank you. Does this language have a name?
Brahm laughed. Yes, but no one knows it. It would be a word of incredible power, something by which you would have control over the entire language and those who use it. People have long searched for it, but no one has ever found it.
I still don't understand how this magic works, said Eragon. Exactly how do I use it? Brahm looked astonished.
Haven't I made that clear?
No. Brahm took a deep breath and said,
To work with magic, you must have a certain innate power, which is very rare among people nowadays. You also have to be able to summon this power at will, once it is called upon. You have to use it or let it fade away. Understood? Now, if you wish to employ the power, you must utter the word or phrase in the ancient language that describes your intent. For example, if you hadn't said Brissinger yesterday, nothing would have happened.
So, I'm limited to my knowledge of this language?
Exactly, growled Brahm. Also, while speaking it, it's impossible to practice deceit.
Eragon shook his head. That can't be. People always lie. The sound of the ancient words can't stop them from doing that. Brahm cocked an eyebrow and said,
Oh no, how do I pronounce this? Featherblocka, Eka Wuonata, Nayo Hene Ono, Blaka Om Lit Lam.
A bird suddenly flitted from a branch and landed on his hand. It trilled lightly and looked at him with its beady eyes. After a moment, he said,
Aitha,
and it fluttered away. How did you do that? Asked Eragon in wonder.
I promised not to harm him. He may not have known exactly what I meant, but in the language of power, the meaning of my words was evident. The bird trusted me because he knows what all animals do, that those who speak in that tongue are bound by their word.
And the elves speak this language?
Yes.
So they never lie?
Not quite, admitted Brahm. They maintain that they don't, and in a way it's true, but they have perfected the art of saying one thing and meaning another. You never know exactly what their intent is, or if you have fathomed it correctly. Many times they only reveal part of the truth and withhold the rest. It takes a refined and subtle mind to deal with their culture.
Eragon considered that. What do personal names mean in this language? Do they give other people power? Brahm's eyes brightened with approval.
Yes, they do. Those who speak the language have 2 names. First, it is for everyday use and has little authority. But the second is their true name, and shared with only a few trusted people. There was a time when no one concealed his true name, but this age isn't as kind. Whoever knows your true name gains enormous power over you. It's like putting your life in another person's hands. Everyone has a hidden name, but few know what it is.
How do you find your true name? Asked Eragon.
Elves instinctively know theirs. No one else has that gift. The human riders usually went on quests to discover it, or found an elf who would tell them, which was rare, for elves don't distribute that knowledge freely, replied Brahm.
I'd like to know mine, said Eragon, wistfully. Brom's brow darkened.
Be careful. It can be a terrible knowledge. To know who you are without any delusions or sympathy is a moment of revelation that no one experiences unscathed. Some have been driven to madness by the stark reality. Most try to forget it, but as much as the name will give others power, so you may gain power over yourself if the truth doesn't break you.
And I'm sure that it would not, stated Saphira. I still wish to know, said Eragon, determined.
You are not easily dissuaded. That is good, for only the resolute find their identity. But I cannot help you with this. It is a search that you will have to undertake on your own.
Brom moved his injured arm and grimaced uncomfortably. Why can't you or I heal with that magic? Asked Eragon. Brom blinked.
No reason. I just never considered it because it's beyond my strength. You could probably do it with the right word, but I don't want you to exhaust yourself.
I could save you a lot of trouble and pain, protested Eragon.
I'll live with it, said Brom flatly. Using magic to heal a wound just takes as much energy as it would to mend on its own. I don't want you tired for the next few days. You shouldn't attempt such a difficult task.
Still, if it's possible to fix your arm, could I bring somebody back from the dead? The question surprised Brom, but he answered quickly.
Remember what I said about projects that will kill you. That is one of them. Riders were forbidden to try to resurrect the dead for their own safety. There is an abyss beyond life where magic means nothing. If you reach into it, your strength will flee, and your soul will fade into darkness. Wizards, sorcerers, and riders all have failed and died on that threshold. Stick with what's possible. Cuts, bruises, maybe broken bones, but definitely not dead people.
Eragon frowned. This is a lot more complex than I thought.
Exactly, said Brom. And if you don't understand what you're doing, you'll try something too big and die.
He twisted in his saddle and swooped down, grabbing a handful of pebbles from the ground. With effort, he righted himself, then discarded all but one of the rocks.
See this pebble?
Yes.
Take it.
Eragon did and stared at the unremarkable lump. It was dull black, smooth, and as large as the end of his thumb. There were countless stones like it on the trail.
This is your training.
Eragon looked back at him, confused. I don't understand.
Of course you don't, said Brom impatiently. That's why I'm teaching you and not the other way around. Now stop talking or we'll never get anywhere. What I want you to do is lift the rock off your palm and hold it in the air for as long as you can. The words you're going to use are Stenner Ryza. Say them.
Stenner Ryza.
Good. Go ahead and try.
Eragon focused sourly on the pebble, searching his mind for any hint of energy that had burned in him the day before. The stone remained motionless, and he stared at it, sweating and frustrated. How am I supposed to do this? Finally, he crossed his arms and snapped. This is impossible.
No, said Brom gruffly. I'll say when it's impossible or not. Fight for it. Don't give in this easily. Try again.
Frowning, Eragon closed his eyes, setting aside all distracting thoughts. He took a deep breath and reached into the farthest corners of his consciousness, trying to find where this power resided. Searching, he found only thoughts and memories, until he felt something different. A small bump that was a part of him, and yet not of him. Excited, he dug into it, seeking what it hid. He felt resistance, a barrier in his mind, but he knew that the power lay on the other side. He tried to breach it, but it held firm before his efforts. Growing angry, Eragon drove into the barrier, ramming against it with all of its might until it shattered like a thin plane of glass, flooding his mind with a river of light. Stenner Ryza, he gasped. The pebble wobbled into the air over his faintly glowing palm. He struggled to keep it floating, but the power slipped away and faded back behind the barrier. The pebble dropped to his hand with a soft plop, and his palm returned to normal. He felt a little tired, but grinned from his success.
Not bad for your first time, said Brom.
Why does my hand do that? It's like a little lantern.
No one's sure, Brom admitted. The riders always preferred to channel their power through whichever hand bore the Gedway Ignacia. You can use your other palm, but it isn't as easy.
He looked at Eragon for a minute.
I'll buy you some gloves at the next town, if it isn't gutted. You hide that mark pretty well on your own, but we don't want anyone to see it by accident. Besides, there may be times when you don't want it to glow to alert an enemy.
Do you have a mark of your own?
No, only riders have them, said Brom. Also, you should know that magic is affected by distance. Just like an arrow or a spear. If you try to lift or move something a mile away, it'll take more energy than if you were closer. So if you see enemies racing after you a league away, let them approach before using magic. Now, back to work. Try to lift the pebble again.
Again? Asked Eragon weakly, thinking of the effort it had taken to do it just once.
Yes, and this time be quicker about it.
They continued with the exercises throughout most of the day. When Eragon finally stopped, he was tired and ill-tempered. In those hours, he had come to hate the pebble and everything about it. He started to throw it away, but Brom said, "Don't. Keep it." Eragon glared at him, then reluctantly tucked the stone into a pocket.
"We're not done yet," warned Brom, "so don't get comfortable."
He pointed at a small plant. "This is called
Delios."
From there on, he instructed Eragon in the ancient language, giving him words to memorize, from Wanderer, a thick, straight stick, to the morning star, Ideal. That evening, they sparred around the fire. Though Brom fought with his left hand, his skill was undiminished. The days followed, the pattern the same. First, Eragon struggled to learn the ancient words to manipulate the pebble. Then, in the evening, he trained against Brom with the fake swords. Eragon was in constant discomfort, but he gradually began to change, almost without noticing. Soon, the pebble no longer wobbled when he lifted it. He mastered the first exercises Brom had given him, and undertook the harder ones. His knowledge of the ancient language grew, and in their sparring, Eragon gained confidence and speed, striking like a snake. His blows became heavier, and his arm no longer trembled when he warded off attacks. The clashes lasted longer as he learned how to fend off Brom. Now, when they went to sleep, Eragon was not the only one with bruises. Saphira continued to grow as well, but more slowly than before. Her extended flights, along with periodic hunts, kept her fit and healthy. She was taller than the horses now, and much longer. Because of her size, the way her scales sparkled, she was altogether too visible. Brom and Eragon worried about it, but they could not convince her to allow the dirt to obscure her scantling hide. They continued south, tracking the Razak. It frustrated Eragon that no matter how fast they were, the Razak always stayed a few days ahead of them. At times he was ready to give up, but then they would find some mark or print that would renew his hope. There were no signs of habitation along the Ninor or in the plains, leaving the three companions undisturbed as the days slipped by. Finally, they neared Deret, the first village since Yazuak. The night before they reached the village, Eragon's dreams were especially vivid. He saw Garrow and Roran at home, sitting in the destroyed kitchen. They asked him for help rebuilding the farm, but he only shook his head with a pang of longing in his heart. "I'm tracking your killers," he whispered to his uncle. Garrow looked at him, asked and demanded, "Do I look dead to you?" "I can't help you," said Eragon softly, feeling tears in his eyes. There was a sudden roar, and Garrow transformed into the Razak. "Then die," they hissed, and leapt at Eragon. He woke up feeling ill and watched the stars slowly turn in the sky. "All will be well, little one," said Saphira gently. And that is the end of that chapter. Next chapter is 21 Deret, and I will read that at another time.